Hey, it's your game mommy, and we're back to Free Period, the Dimension 20 Fantasy High Junior Year Talkback series. Now, if you're not watching the YouTube and you haven't heard me introduce him yet, there's a reason for that. You'll notice there is no Jordon Brown, the unofficial dropout reporter Jordon Brown. We had to move forward with the series without him, and by we, I mean I don't know why I'm using like my customer support voice too many years in the field. I had to move forward with the series without him. It has nothing to do with Jordon whatsoever. Jordon is super game, and we will figure out something to work on in the future. But I had to move forward with this on without him. So it's going to change a little bit. The first thing that is going to change is the overlay. Let's see if I actually edit that properly. But the overlay is now this. You'll notice this chalkboard here, or maybe here. I don't know yet which side. I haven't made the overlay yet. That's going to be one of those 3 a.m. projects before I publish this. But nonetheless, the overlay is going to give us a chalkboard to kind of track the things. The second thing you'll notice is that this will be much shorter. It won't be a 30-40 minute conversation between me and Jordon anymore. It'll probably be more like a 10 to 15 minute, we'll call it lecture series, but it's really just my thoughts on the most recent episode of Fantasy High Junior Year and everything. I know we skipped last week, that's because of some scheduling conflicts, but we're back this week for Fracas at the Frosty Fair Folk Festival. That's a lot of F's. That's not, I'm sorry sonically for that. I have a lot of range on my sibilants and F and noises, and that's tough on you, and I apologize. But nonetheless, without Jordon here and everything, don't worry, we're still going to have the fan art segment. That's still going to come in between parts 1, 2, and 3, and we're still going to have the advertisements for the Jordon Brown, his Patreon, because he does excellent interviews with the dropout community and everything. So let's get started with this episode of Free Period. Again, the episode's title is Fracas at the Frosty Fair Folk Festival, but what we're going to jump right into is the stress mechanic, results, and consequences. If you don't know, and for some reason this is the first episode of this that you're watching, we've talked about how excited we were about the mechanization of stress, right? I talked a lot about how cool it was to merge that into D&D. Now, certainly Fantasy High Junior Year is not the first game to ever introduce the concept of stress into a tabletop game. Especially the Eldritch Horror games are like renowned for this, right? There's lots of tabletop that does this. But the way that Brennan did it, just to recap, is that when they were rolling their skill checks for their various paths for the school year, they had a DC 5, 10, 15, 20 increasing based off what they were looking to accomplish in their downtime, right? Their studies or their work or their, pursuits of passion or extracurricular activities. And they could take a stress token to re-roll if they failed the roll. Well, what we come to find out is that the stress tokens actually convert into becoming more distracted from certain things. Essentially, a stress token can embark disadvantage on a skill check that you have proficiency with. If you choose a skill that you have no proficiency with, you have to pick 2 unproficient skills, right? So this is a really cool structure because the players had between 1 to 3 stress tokens apiece, and they could pick different things skill-wise to choose, whether it's initiative or religion or arcana or nature or speak with animals or what have you, right? Animal handling, not speak with animals, that's a spell. The reason I think this is so good is because of a few things, really. Number one, it gives the players like a cool reward consequence thing that doesn't fully hamstring all of their like natural abilities in combat or their cleverness and everything. Number two, it gives them the choice of how those consequences spread out across their skills, which allows the players to like role play a bit more with it, like Emily started off and sort of passively guilted Siobhan into doing by being such a good example, right? Or you could just use skills that you're already bad at, right? Or that you already aren't very strong in, and it doesn't matter if you get to do them. So like Zach, when he said that his first one was going to be disadvantage on initiative because he tends to roll bad on initiative anyway, so why not take the hit there? Though you could say that that's also from the exhaustion of studying 4 courses incompletion at the same time for Gorgug. Either way, you can kind of connect them. You can have players like really lean into the roleplay of it or game the system, but it still mechanically does stuff. The other cool thing that I think that this does, and I'm going to refer to my notes here, is mid-level combat to high-level combat, especially with a party of 6 in D&D, is difficult. It is challenging. And so what Brennan has done by introducing this, and especially even out of combat with skill checks where your proficiencies have gone up, you have bonuses to higher stats and everything. Maybe you took a feat here or there, or have a magic item that really benefits you. It really lets him weaken the group a bit more without really feeling like he's taking anything away. It's not like he's constantly stunning them in the battle. Am I right? That totally doesn't happen. We'll get there. We'll get there. But what I wanted to call out on this is that I think this is really cool. Now, we don't know if this is going to be permanent through the season or if every like downtime studying activity period it resets and then they make the choices all over again. We don't know what that's going to be. We also don't know what the red tokens are for either. So that's really interesting, but I'm so excited to see it. I'm super excited to see how it affects like the skill checkier episodes and everything like that, or if it affects the future school season and classes and class downtime. But we'll check that out. I just think it's a phenomenal mechanic and it's really exciting. It's well implemented. It gives a lot of play to the characters. It lets them make their own bed as players, which is just top shelf recommendation as a GM. So yeah, we're gonna look at that. But before we look at that, and before we get excited about that, we should get excited about patreon.com/thejordanbrown, where Jordon Brown just recently interviewed the Sam Reich. Yes, the big head honcho of Dropout. He's been there the whole time, and now Jordon gets to finally interview him. There's other interviews up there with the artists of this season, with different players from previous seasons, producers, miniature makers. You've got the classics like Rick Perry. You've got the Blood Feud with Abria. You've got the wonderful Carlos Luna. Like, so many interviews. I might suggest Kate May. And the reason for that is moving right into this advertisement really call out of Jordon Brown. So enjoy, and we'll be back shortly. Say whatever's in your heart about Jordon Brown.
Whatever's in my heart about Jordon Brown. Number one, I love you. You're my brother. Second, you're a punk for not being here.
Yeah.
You're an absolute punk. What the heck were you doing? Raising your child? Come on.
Yeah, right? Like some sort of father figure.
Ew.
It's so gross.
Gonna make me sell your merch for you?
Yeah, look at this. Look at how much work they're doing for you, Jordon.
Come on.
You're just another white man relying on the labor of everyone but white man to get it done.
Come on.
Hey, Jordon, I actually care enough to go see the people that contribute to Dropout, as opposed to you sitting in your high ivory tower down in Texas.
No excuse to get to Seattle, my dude.
No,
like, what the hell? It's right around. It's in the backyard.
It's in the backyard. You could have just popped on over here. Anyway, just wanted to say hi.
See you later, dude.
Is there anything you want to say to unofficial Dropout reporter Jordon Brown?
I've been informed we're in a blood feud.
But wasn't that wonderful? I think it was. Go to patreon.com/thejordanbrown. Support him in his efforts to interview all the people that make not only Dimension 20, but a ton of Dropout happen. If you're interested on being on this show, maybe, or you have your thoughts and opinions, or you disagree, or have things that I've missed and everything, feel free to comment below. And of course, if you want to, like and subscribe. I know I should do that at the top. We're getting there. We're working there. But for now, let's get into the second subject. So let's talk about the fracas itself, the combat at the Frosty Fair Festival, which is also at the Thistle Spring, a wonderful, beautiful tree, right? Here's what's interesting about this. This is more about, and I'm checking my notes here, this is more about bringing in a certain kind of unique scenario that I think a lot of GMs and a lot of storytellers in games do fairly frequently. And that's the bringing something new to the players that isn't new to the world. The Frosty Fair Festival is a world-traveling festival that happens annually that Gorgug's parents go to. but Gorgug himself and none of the players have ever experienced it either in character or out of character, which means it's a brand new thing even though it's at their location. Why is it important that it's at their location? Well, this season of Fantasy High, unlike sophomore year, is grounded in staying around Eggford Academy in their hometown of Elmville, in Spire, right? Like, they need to stay situated. Now, a lot of GMs will do things like traveling carnival will come, or maybe a holiday celebration, which is not that different than a festival, right? And if it already existed in the world and already has flavor, it makes the world feel more lived in while still being a brand new to discover thing for the players. We've also never seen the Thistle Spring tree and home area in mini fashion, mini and maxi and macro fashion and everything. So it's nice to see something that we've experienced as audience members, but especially for the players, in like that sort of scenario, right? Where we have our vision of it, and now we see that vision come to life, right? Super awesome. Love the lights in the tree, love all the banners, all the little tents and everything outside. In the talk back on Dimension 20, Siobhan and Brennan both talk about how this was a big part of their childhood. And as a person that didn't do this stuff as a kid, but did end up doing a lot of it in my late 20s and through my 30s with these kind of festival, fair, music, encampment, multi-day things, hippie, sort of like Renaissance-y kind of pirate event type things, I definitely sympathize. There's definitely a lot of nudity at those. That is not new. And there's other substances and things that tend to go on. But I won't reveal too much of that, I guess, here on YouTube. What I do want to do is get back to the point of this, which is bringing something that exists in the world to the players and setting it as a backdrop for conflict. It lets them keep the root there, and it lets them like really experience it. And there's more than just festivals and holiday celebrations and stuff you could do. You could have, if you're doing a real fantasy feudal campaign, you could have tax collectors come to town, which is annual, which is a little different than, say, if bandits come. You could have a town election for mayor, the annual town auction, right? You could have an every 4 years like lunar event. These are the sorts of things that you can bring to wherever the players are to help keep them in the same space, but keep that space fresh. And I really like that they chose this. Now, this happened a lot in Fantasy High freshman year, the first year of Dimension 20, the first show of Dimension 20. It happened quite a bit where they'd go to different locations in the town, but they kind of have an idea of those locations. So bringing this to a known location we've never seen visually before, chef's kiss, masterpiece. Other masterpieces I want to bring to your attention are the masterpieces of the fan artists that allow us to have the art in our episodes. And by our, I again mean me. I miss Jordon. I miss his beautiful gray hair. It seeps into my dreams. Did you know, fun fact about Jordon Brown, he's only 1 year older than me, or younger than me. And it wouldn't look it by the level of lack of care I take for myself versus him. But nonetheless, fan artists. Fan artists help make this fandom wonderful. These artists are making further expansion and appreciation of these episodes of Fantasy High a gift. Again, it's like my favorite thing to do is dig through this every episode. So their descriptions will be, of course, their tags will be in the description section, so you can go to all of their pages and follow them, and you can also see them called out in the video itself. So let's watch some beautiful fan art. They'll be mostly from this episode. I might catch a few from last episode since we skipped last episode and throw them in here, and then we'll be back with our final topic. the final segment of this episode, number one, again, thank you, fan artists. If you want to submit your fan art and have it featured on here, just let me know in the comments down below. If you're a fan of fan artists, we're going to continue to feature their art so you can follow this series. You can hit the like notification buttons. You know the deal. But let's get to this final topic, which is bail and eject prep. And that's talking about the vulture dimension. Now, the vulture dimension is really interesting because it involves a bit of the lore of Fantasy High and where it started, and a battle set with some skateboarding dwarves at a shutdown factory, and a little piece that was just there to fill out the battle set that the players got really interested in. And so they teased it. There'd been a vulture in the first combat of Fantasy High junior year, and then there was one here as well. They teased it, kept putting it in front of the players like, what's this? Don't you want to investigate this? But what it really was is A, Brennan knowing his players very well, and B, an eject button from combat. Think about where they were in the fracas at this point. Grix had 3 of the party stunned, so that's half of them, and 1 of them dominate beast, that's Riz. So they only had 2 party members active. Now, they'd been doing a good job at fighting the sex robots, like, slash repurposed, functional machines, and Grix, and he definitely was on his back foot, but now you've only got 2 party members going. Now, if they'd knocked out Grix, sure, that would have been something that could have happened between Kristen and I think the other person that was up was Gorgug, maybe? No, it wasn't Gorgug, it was Adine. The other person up, Adine. They might have been able to drop the damage that they needed to do to get it done, but some of the party were hurting. Kristen's low on spells, or has no real spells because of things that are happening in her roleplay with Cassandra, and the GM needed a way to move on. And so Brennan teed it up, even though Allie was going to do something else with Kristen, really put that vulture in front of Allie and was like, grab this carrot. And so we don't know what's going to happen next episode. We don't know if they're just going to pop back, if it's going to be a brief bit, if it circumvents the combat entirely and we get to see Grix return as a bad guy, or if it just allows them to rest up a little bit, come out of stun, and finish the combat successfully. Because what we're not looking for in this combat is we're not looking for a full death, not at least at this point. We're looking, certainly not a TPK. Remember, this is a production show. Now, if you're playing in a game where that's fine, then the dice can go where they may. But the reason I bring this up is for a lot of GMs, they don't have an eject option for the players. So they have to come up with things, or God forbid, go against my own ethical code and fudge their dice in order to make sure the players don't die before the GM wants them to have their life threatened. And then in situations where you have players after session 0 that don't want their characters to die, and have made that explicit, these are the kinds of things, the Deus Ex Machina, that a GM can introduce that's kind of based in the lore and is something that's kind of always been around in Fantasy High, but like in a fun way that's still just like, let me clear the board and make this a little bit easier, or get you away from danger, or put a different kind of challenge in front of you that isn't necessarily life or death, but could create other problems. And I think that's what we're going to see here, is that last one, where it's going to complicate things. That, or it's a full refresh if Brennan is thinking this is where Grix needs to GTFO, right? Off the screen, and then they're going to discover more mystery around him, because obviously that's true. But either way, it's an excellent use of it because it's really based on baiting your players, which is a great way to eject them because it still has their buy-in of the action. And Brennan did not make it subtle by being like, there's the vulture. They brought up the vulture. Vulture makes eye contact. Vulture's right there. Yeah, you can interact with it if you get 5 feet. And obviously they prepped a bunch for it with the animation and everything in the dome. But yeah, that's it. Always have your eject button. Definitely you can bring new things to the places your players have already been and be as exciting and new as if they were journeying. And make sure that if you're introducing mechanics that do hamper the players, that it's a buy-in mechanic that has a win-lose situation for them, a trade-off, and that they themselves get a little bit of room to play with. But that's been free period for this. Well, I'll give you a little bit more. I'll give you a little bit more. Every free period now, we're going to have a little bit of bonus homework. And my bonus homework for you right now is that if you play in tabletop games, and especially if you GM them, make sure to introduce a villain or multiple villains that gaslight the party. Not the players. You're not gaslighting the players. Those villains are gaslighting their characters. You want to make it obvious and you want to make it silly. Now, what I'm referring to here in this episode of Dimension 20 is the Ruben scene about not ever taking a shit and having to sign autographs even when they're not there, just to kind of play into the bit. But nothing makes players, or more importantly their characters, more angry than being openly and obviously and indefensibly gaslit in a way that's not at all convincing. They hate it, and they will want to attack that. So if you really want your players to have their characters hate an enemy of yours, make sure that that enemy just boldly lies to them about the reality of the situation in a way that the characters are 100% sure is a lie, but everyone just goes along with it. And so that is the end of free period. I hope that you can still keep watching this. I know it changes the dynamic if it's just me and my thoughts. And again, if you want to be on an episode of Free Period, reach out to me. We'll see possibly what we can do. If you're a big fan of Dimension 20, if you make Dimension 20 or drop out content on the old social medias or here on YouTube, reach out. But for now, I've been Steve, and you have been wonderful. Thank you so much. Class dismissed.